Boom. Once we completed pre-flight training, we entered primary flight training. At any one time in 1968, there were 10 flight companies in session. You ended up, you get to pick, well, I guess you draw what kind of helicopter you're going to fly.
No, you're told.
Okay, you're told. And you get the TH-55.
Love that aircraft.
Looks like kind of a dragonfly looking thing.
Yeah, it's it was bought, the Army bought them right off the shelf from Hughes Aircraft. And in the civilian world, it's a Hughes 300. You started the engine up, and then you engaged the clutch, which engaged 8 rubber bands that started turning the main rotor. And
so we got that going for us.
You had that going for you. But the thing had a ton of power. And down there in Texas in the summer, the OH-13s and the 23s, the other 2 training aircraft, they could barely get off the ground. TH-55 would spring off the ground. So it was just a great little aircraft to fly. I loved it.
Awesome. About 2 months into our flight training, we returned from the flight line and we were told to get in company formation right away. Once all 275 of us were assembled, as we'd had about 75 drop out of the class at this point, our company commander came forward and addressed the class. One of our fellow classmates crashed that day and was killed. That was something none of us had considered at this point in our training. His death would not be the last either. Another student and his flight instructor were killed in a mid-air collision with another aircraft flown by someone from another class. How there weren't a lot more mid-air collisions always amazed me. A little bit of a wake-up call?
Well, it was. You know, you had roughly around 1,200 aircraft at 8 o'clock in the morning leaving and coming back in at 11 o'clock and then leaving again at 1 o'clock and coming back at 5 o'clock. And most of them were flown by students. So, you know, and the students had anywhere from 10 hours to 50 hours, or let's say you got 100 hours total while you're in flight school, early flight school, first stage there. So you had a lot of inexperience out there running around in not that big of an area. And why we didn't have a lot more mid-airs, I have no idea. The one student, the first student that we lost, he flew into a cloud, and we hadn't had any weather instrument training yet at that point. Well, he went in the cloud, and people that saw him, he came out upside down. He was inverted. And you just don't invert in a helicopter. It doesn't work. So that he got killed that way. And then the other one was a student and an instructor, and another aircraft slammed into them. We lost them there. Those are the only 2 that I knew about. There were others that did happen in other flight classes, but we were kind of fortunate. We started out with 350. We graduated, I think, 150, somewhere in that neighborhood there.
Get done with that. It's on to advanced flight training. This was, I kind of had to, there's a good leadership lesson here that I wanted to jump into. It says, we are approaching the end of our instrument training when we returned to the barracks from the flight line the night prior to the meteorology exam. Mr. Clinton wasn't happy with the condition of the barracks and had gone on a rampage, aided by a bottle of Jack Daniels. Beds were overturned, wall locker contents were lying on the floor, the fire hose was spraying water, and the contents of everyone's foot lockers were everywhere except in the foot lockers. He was on a tirade. One cadet was singled out. Mr. Clinton was berating him. Evidently, the cadet was responsible for his 5 o'clock shadow. Mr. Clinton told the cadet to get into the push-up position. Once there, he placed a razor on the floor in front of him and told him to shave. The cadet looked scared, and I was mad. I had had enough of Mr. Clinton's crap. With all respect for his rank that I could muster, I stepped forward and got in Clinton's face. Sir, you have been drinking and you are drunk. If you do not leave this minute, I am going straight to the company commander and have him resolve this situation. Now leave, I shouted. There was dead silence. Mr. Clinton just stood there and glared at me with his bloodshot eyes. Everyone was watching. Finally, he laughed, turned, and staggered out of the barracks. Everyone, including me, sighed with relief. We spent most of the night getting the barracks back in order, and no one had an opportunity to study for the weather exam. It showed the next day. The exam was in the morning. When we returned to the barracks after flying in the afternoon, we were immediately informed by the company first sergeant that we were all restricted to the barracks until further notice, and I was to report to the company commander's office. When I arrived, the senior officer from the weather committee was present as well. I was told to sit down. Cadet Corey, do you know why I've restricted the company and called you here? The company commander asked. Like I was some clairvoyant and I could read his mind. This was the first time I had ever spoken to the man. Again, Dad's words of wisdom came to mind. "No, sir," I replied, knowing this wasn't the time to be a smartass. "It appears, Cadet Corey, that most of your class failed the weather exam. We need to know why," he stated. Oh shit, most of the class, which includes me too. Again, as class leader, it was my fault. "Didn't you study for the exam last night?" asked the weather committee instructor, who didn't look happy. Why did I suspect that shit rolled downhill here and it was coming right at me? However, I was seeing a U-turn for this shitstorm. "No, sir, we did not study last night. We had a party instead," I replied. Their eyes bulged, and I thought both men were going to drop dead from heart attacks. "You did what?" gagged the company commander. "You had a party the night before one of the most important exams in this course? Do you realize by having a party and failing that exam, you could all fail flight school and be sent to infantry immediately?" "Yes, sir," I replied, and let them stew on this revelation. Now the weather instructor had a grin on his face as he turned to the company commander. "Well, I guess the problem wasn't with the instruction, but with the discipline of these cadets." I was beginning to see what was going on here. Somewhere above their level, the shit had hit the fan, and someone high up was looking for somewhere to lay the blame. The Army needed helicopter pilots at this point, had spent considerable money training 80 cadets. The Army couldn't afford to wash out 80 cadets at one time. The company commander wasn't looking too good right about now. "Cadet Corey, why in the hell would you have a party the night before a major exam?" "Sir, we had no choice," I answered sheepishly. I was beginning to enjoy this. I had been around the military long enough to know when people were in a state of panic over something that had gone terribly wrong. "Oh, Dad, you taught me well." "What the hell do you mean you had no choice?" the company commander. "Sir, when we returned from flight line last night, Mr. Clinton had torn apart the barracks to include turning on the fire hose and told us to get the mess cleaned up before morning. We had a barracks cleaning party to get it squared away, and that took until midnight. Lights out was at 2200, but we worked on stuff until dark, until we had it taken care of. Only the married men had a chance to study last night." You're dismissed, Cadet Corey, and there you go. So you you then you go to the company commander, then you end up with the battalion commander,
and the school commandant finally.
And the school commandant finally. You end up all assembled. The battalion commander comes out. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Barlow, your battalion commander. I have not met most of you and normally do not meet cadets until graduation. However, because of this incident, I have met some of you and thought I should meet all of you. What you have experienced is not typical of the treatment of cadets. Changes have been made. The first being that you have a new company commander. Major Kidder will be your company commander for the remainder of your training. Mr. Clinton and Sergeant First Class Moron will no longer be your tax either. Major Kidder," and he turns it over.
To back up a little bit, our class got a bad rap the very first day we showed up. Me and another guy, we had flown into Savannah the night before. So we had a 1,200-hour report. Him and I got there at about 11. So we reported on time. The rest of the guys, they all flew in on a flight that was supposed to land at 8 o'clock in the morning, but didn't because of the weather. So they all showed up an hour late. So that set Clinton off. And for 8 weeks, we never got a pass to get off the base, where every other class had blanket passes on the weekends. And so Clinton and the man had a drinking problem, and this wasn't the first incident with him, but this is the one that broke the camel's back. When he went through that weather exam, as I said in the book, you couldn't afford to flunk 79 guys right now. Somebody was going to go ballistic over this. So it worked its way up, and thank God when we got to the brigade commander's office, and they asked me, they said, "Why do you think Mr. Clinton did that?" And I said, "Well, sir, it's because he was drunk." Well, the three of them looked at me like, "Do you know what you just said? You accuse an officer of this?" Well, I was a little bit older than most cadets. I joined the Army, I was 21 the day I came in. And all the other classmates, they were 19, 20-year-olds. And being around the military all my life, I had an idea how things worked. So I was going to play my trump card, and that's where I played the trump card, was with the brigade commander. Over the next couple of days, they called in. Every day they call in 3 guys, and they'd ask them the same questions, and everybody backed my comments up. So we got Mr. Clinton, got rid of Mr. Clinton, got rid of Sergeant Moron, and I use the name Sergeant Moron. I never heard the guy ever speak. He had tattoos covering him everywhere before tattoos were popular. And so I don't know anything about the man outside of, he never said anything, so I figured he was a moron. But then after that, we went into our advanced training. Huey transition was the following Monday morning, and things went along really well after that with the unit. Major Kidderman he was a great guy.
How'd you like that Huey when you started flying it?
Oh, I loved it. I still love the Huey to this day. The Huey's a fantastic aircraft. Had plenty of power. Even the Delta models had plenty of power. They were forgiving. They were a dream to fly, and they still are.
Isn't it crazy? Well, I guess it's not too crazy. I mean, I joined the Navy in 1990, and we still had Hueys, and there's still Hueys right now.
The Army's put all theirs in museums.
What about the Marine Corps?
The Marine Corps has got a different Huey. They got a big beefed up one.
Okay.
Muscular thing. So it's twin engines, and I'm not sure if it's got 4 rotor blades or just 2, but they've got a beefed up Huey that's much bigger than the Army's ever were. So it's a great aircraft. I mean, why we wouldn't still be using them today, I don't know. I mean, we got the Black Hawks now. But
Yeah. They're way bigger. They're way smaller than a Black Hawk, though.
Oh,
they?
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like tiny.
We could get 6 combat troops besides the crew of 4 aboard, and had power to to do things and stuff like that. The Black Hawk, when we assaulted into Iraq back during Desert Storm, there was 15 guys in my aircraft with me, and my RTOs, and I had 1 squad of infantrymen with me when we went in. So much more power, much faster aircraft, and it was an aircraft. The Black Hawk, I was on the test bed for it. They were designed in case we went into war with Iran. And that's really what we were looking at, is for an aircraft that could get the altitude, the mountainous altitude around Iran to replace the Huey. And the Black Hawk was the choice over it. There was 2. There was a Boeing put a proposal up for the UTAS, and then Sikorsky put a proposal up for the UTAS. And it was called UTAS at that time, Utility Tactical Transport System. And Sikorsky's the one that won. So,
And it seems like when you look at the Huey, it's like a freaking 1969 muscle car, just in terms of, hey, that's the engine. There's you see the aircraft now, the helicopters. There's so many computer parts too. It's like when you open up the hood of a car nowadays, you don't know what the hell's in there, right? It's all like you can't fix any of it with a wrench.
well, you look at the Huey. Who's the guy crewing the Huey? The guy was 19 years old, maybe 20, and he was the crew chief. And what those kids did with those engines was just amazing. They'd work on them, and I was a pilot, and the most dangerous thing you could do is let the pilot up there around the engine. My crew chief wouldn't dare do that. But these kids, they really maintained those things well. And what they couldn't do at the operator level, at the crew chief level, they went into the maintenance level, which is right there with our unit. And they were all 19 and 20-year-olds doing the sheet metal work and the electronics. I took a bullet through the wiring bundle one day. And the wiring bundle was about that thick, and it was maybe 35, 40 white wires in there. And I saw a kid sit down and sit there and put each one of those wires back properly to each one of them to get the communications and the electronics all working. To me, it was a bunch of spaghetti.
Check. So, let's fast forward a little bit. Let's get to Vietnam.